My own brother set me up for a crime I didn't commit. Watch how one brave witness shattered his lies and gave me back my life. I was 22 years old, fresh out of college with a finance degree in hand and a job offer at a top firm waiting for me when it happened. My brother, the person I trusted most, turned me into the police. That morning started like any other. I poured my usual cup of black coffee, buttoned my crisp shirt, and kissed my fiancée goodbye as she headed to her job. I felt invincible, convinced my future was finally unfolding exactly as I'd planned. Just as I grabbed my keys from the counter, my phone buzzed with a single text. "They're at the door. The cops are here. They say you stole Dad's retirement money." My heart dropped into my stomach. I stared at the screen in disbelief, coffee mug slipping from my hand, shattering on the tile floor. Fear and confusion flooded me as I sprinted toward the front door, glancing past the broken coffee mug to see flashing red and blue lights through the window. I barely had time to close the door when two uniformed officers pushed their way past me, brandishing a warrant. Their expressions were cold and determined. Behind them, my brother, Michael, stood with his arms folded, face stern and unyielding. "Michael?" I managed to choke out. He shook his head as if he hadn't heard me. The lead officer grabbed my arm roughly, snapped handcuffs on my wrists and said, "You're under arrest for embezzlement. We have your brother's statement." Pain seared through me. This wasn't just legal trouble. It was a betrayal of the deepest kind. At the police station, they stuffed me into a fluorescent-lit interview room and slapped down a folder of bank statements and forged withdrawal slips. "Dad reported you missing $200,000 from his account," the detective said flatly. My brother's signature on the bank's digital ledger glaring back at me felt like a punch to the gut. I tried to argue, "I didn't do this. My fingerprints aren't on those withdrawal sheets." Michael watched silently as they booked me, his face a perfect mask of disappointment and resolve. As they processed me, fingerprinted my hands, took my mugshot, I caught a glimpse of Michael's eyes. There was no sorrow there, no hint of doubt. He'd crafted a perfect narrative. I was the greedy son who emptied our father's savings. My protests felt meaningless, swallowed by the hum of fluorescent lights and the clink of metal doors closing behind me. In that moment, I realized my life had changed forever. Dreams I'd worked so hard for were collapsing like a house of cards. That evening, I sat in a holding cell, my shoulders slumped, staring at the cinder block wall. The faint echo of distant footsteps and metal gates slamming shut was my new reality. I replayed every conversation I'd ever had with Michael, every memory of us as kids building forts and playing catch. How did he become the person pointing a finger at me, accusing me of a crime I never committed? Each thought twisted the knife of betrayal deeper. My mind raced as guard footsteps approached and passed my cell. I pressed my palms to the cold concrete floor, thinking of my fiancée waiting anxiously at home, unaware that her future husband was falsely accused. I whispered to myself, "I will fight this. I will prove they're wrong." Yet, even as I vowed to clear my name, a trembling doubt lingered. How do you fight a conspiracy crafted by someone you love? I recalled Michael's quiet competitiveness, always trying to outdo me academically, socially. Only I never believed he would go this far. The injustice felt surreal, like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. And yet, as I clenched my fists against the chill of the cell, I felt a flicker of resolve ignite in my chest. I would not let his lies define me. In that dimly lit cell, my thoughts shifted from shock to strategy. I needed to find witnesses, gather alibis, and unmuddle the digital trail he'd fabricated. But I also knew one hard truth. While I sat here, powerless behind these bars, time was ticking. The longer I remained locked up, the more my reputation and future would be destroyed. I steeled myself, promising that I would do whatever it took to expose my brother's deception. As Act 1 closes, the camera lingers on my face. Eyes red-rimmed, jaw tense, shoulders caught between despair and determination. The worst part wasn't the handcuffs or the cell. It was the knowledge that my own blood had orchestrated my downfall. But deep down, a single thought kept me from drowning in hopelessness. If someone out there is brave enough to tell the truth, I will be free again. The following morning, I was escorted into a stark, fluorescent-lit interrogation room. A detective slammed a binder onto the metal table in front of me, rattling loose papers. Your brother claims you transferred $200,000 from your father's retirement account into a shell company you control. How do you explain these transactions? He demanded. My throat tightened. Those aren't mine. I never set up any shell company. He slid the forged bank statements across the table, screenshots of online transfers bearing both my name and digital signature. So, you deny authorizing these? He pressed. I shook my head, voice trembling. Yes. I swear, I never logged into Dad's account. I was at a finance internship that night, preparing a presentation. You can check my emails and my time card. The detective's partner, sitting across, sneered. Your brother provided these printouts and a sworn statement. He said he discovered that code in your brother's password, leading directly to withdrawals. Are you telling us he's lying? I felt my chest tighten. He's framing me. I don't know how he did it, but I didn't steal anything. 15 minutes later, they booked me on charges of felony embezzlement and identity theft. My parents, waiting in the gallery like stunned statues, covered their mouths as they heard the charges read aloud. My mother's tears felt like sharp needles in my chest. I glanced toward her, mouthed, "I'm innocent," but her eyes only widened in pain. At the bail hearing, the prosecutor painted me as a scheming traitor. This defendant abused his familial bond to steal his father's nest egg, an egregious breach of trust. The judge set bail at $500,000 cash or bond. My heart sank. My father's retirement fund was gone. I doubted we could scrape together $500,000, especially with legal fees mounting. Back in my cell that evening, I pressed my head against the cinder block wall, mind racing. I remembered the argument Michael and I had 2 weeks earlier when Dad chastised him for poor grades. Michael had stormed out, tears and threats in his voice. At the time, I'd chalked it up to sibling rivalry. Now, I realized how calculative he was. He'd set me up while we were still on speaking terms. My public defender, Sarah Lee, visited at our scheduled meeting. She spread out the case file on the metal desk in the visiting booth. We need to subpoena Michael's laptop, his emails, and the bank's server logs for the exact timestamps of those transfers, she said. I nodded vigorously, relief and desperation mingling. Do whatever it takes, Sarah. I'll help however I can. Alone later, I stared at my reflection in the small cell window, noticing how gaunt and hollow my face looked. In a single moment, Michael had stolen 10 years of my life, my career prospects, my reputation, and my freedom. I thought of my fiancée, waiting at home, probably devastated by the headline, "Local finance graduate arrested for embezzlement." The nights were the worst. I lay on the thin mattress, the hum of the fluorescent light above mocking my helplessness. I forced myself to review every detail I knew: my bank passwords, my work, hours at the internship, my fiancé's alibi that I was with her the night of one of the key transactions. Each memory was a thread I hoped Sarah could use to prove my case. As Act 2 closed, I pressed my forehead against my folded arms on the desk. The weight of betrayal was crushing, but as fear threatened to overwhelm me, I clenched my fists and whispered, "I will not let him win. I will expose the truth, no matter how long it takes." The steel door clanged shut behind me as I was escorted into the intake area. My hands still bore the faint redness of handcuff marks, but the sting of them had faded, replaced by more profound ache. The intake officer barked orders, stripped me of my personal belongings, and handed me a faded jumpsuit with Inmate 21345 printed on the back. I realized for the first time that I was not just accused. I was a prisoner. When the cell door opened, I stepped into a small, dimly lit room. The walls were cinderblock gray, towering overhead like silent witnesses. My cellmate, a burly man with tired eyes and thick arms, watched me with suspicion. He grunted and returned to his corner, avoiding my gaze. I sank onto the narrow bunk, heart pounding, and clenched the edge of the mattress. My mind wandered back to the day before, holding a bank statement, confident in my innocence. Now, doubts and fears swirled. Breakfast was at 6 a.m. the next morning. Cold, scrambled eggs and a watery slush of grits. I choked it down, eyes darting around the cafeteria as other inmates stared. Whispers floated through the air. "He's the guy who stole from his dad. Ain't that the finance kid?" Each word felt like a knife. I wondered if anyone believed me when I insisted Michael framed me. But here, innocence meant nothing. A label stuck, and that defined you. By mid-morning, I joined the work detail line, assigned to wash prison laundry. The machines roared, drowning out my thoughts. As I loaded sheets and uniform, shirts into the industrial washer, my hands trembled from the harsh chemicals and cold water. Each scrape of detergent-sodden fabric against the metal vat felt like a reminder that I was trapped, not by choice, but by a lie my brother told. After work, I lay on my bunk, scanning the call log sheet. One brief call home per week, that was the only link I had to the outside world. My father's voice was hoarse. My mother cried softly into the phone. My fiancé's messages, short, loving, couldn't mask the worry behind each word. I swallowed hard, determined to stay strong for them, but I felt sick thinking I might never hold my loved ones again. At yard time, the cold wind bit my face as I stepped into the open field enclosed by chain-link fences. Some inmates shot baskets, others played cards on a graffiti-scarred table. I stood at the fence for a moment, looking beyond to barren trees and concrete, imagining my life before. Business suits, client meetings, weekend dates. Now my clothes were coarse, my world reduced to a steel cage. That night, unable to sleep, I took out a piece of soap wrapped in paper towels, my makeshift pencil, and scratched notes onto a scrap of paper. Michael's IP address, Dad's login timestamp, laundry logs, alibi. Each word felt like a lifeline tethering me to the hope of proving Michael's deception. My pencil breaks echoed in the darkness as I scribbled until my wrist ached. A fellow inmate named Jasmine, an older woman serving time for shoplifting, peeked under the bars and whispered, "You look like you've got a heavy heart. Need someone to talk to?" I hesitated, ashamed to admit I was here because my brother lied, but I nodded. She slid a small pack of paper under the door and said, "Use it wisely. Sometimes talking helps." Over the next days, I reached for that paper whenever despair threatened to swallow me. I wrote letters to Sarah detailing my observations. The guard who snuck me, the laundry logs, the suspicious bank emails, Carlos's impending deposition. These scribbles became my mission plan. Even in the bleakest moments, the act of writing anchored me to the belief that truth would emerge. As Act 3 closes, I sat on the bunk under the harsh overhead light, holding a single sheet filled with my scrawled notes. I stared at the stark wall across from me and whispered, "I may be behind bars, but I will not let this lie define me. I will fight until my voice is heard." The resolve in my own words lit the darkest part of my soul, reminding me that freedom begins in the mind. By my third year behind these bars, the despair of my wrongful conviction had solidified into a cold determination. I spent every free hour hunched over a smuggled piece of paper, cross-referencing the IP addresses on Michael's forged emails with the server logs I'd obtained through Sarah's legal motions. When the guards slipped those logs under my cell door, I felt a surge of hope, proof that the emails came from Michael's apartment, not mine. Examining the server logs line by line, I noticed the IP addresses on key emails matched a residence several blocks from our childhood home. The same apartment where Michael had been living rent-free. My pulse pounded as I realized I had concrete digital evidence that Michael sent those emails himself. I underlined each entry in the log with a stubby crayon, imagining the courtroom reaction when this revelation surfaced. Yet digital proof alone wouldn't be enough. Sarah insisted we needed a living, breathing witness who could confirm Michael's whereabouts on the night of the embezzlement. My memories drifted back to late-night college study sessions when Michael would crash at my apartment. I remembered his best friend, Carlos, a guy who lived across the city in that very apartment, texting me about Michael's temper, or how he'd seen Michael rushing to sickle his phone late at night. Using the few printed directories I'd managed to keep, I wrote a letter to Carlos, pleading him to come forward. Michael's emails were forged. Please help me prove I was innocent. I sealed the letter and slipped it to a sympathetic guard during yard time, who promised to mail it for me. Each day I waited for a response. I lay on the bunk, tracing my fingers over the prison wall's rough texture, praying Carlos would believe me rather than Michael's lies. Weeks later, I received a crumpled envelope addressed in familiar handwriting. Inside was a typed, notarized statement from Carlos. He swore that on the night of the major transfers, he'd spent the evening drinking coffee with Michael at that apartment, far from the bank's login terminals. His affidavit included apartment door camera stills, Michael entering his address at midnight, timestamp matching the forged email timestamps. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. Finally, a human witness corroborating the logs. But Carlos's statement alone wouldn't suffice. Sarah arranged for him to testify at a deposition via video conference. When the day arrived, I watched on the courtroom monitor as Carlos described his late-night conversation with Michael. Michael's voice slurred, admitting to sorting out Dad's money, a confession that would never have come to light without Carlos's courage. In that moment, tears blurred my vision. My brother's duplicity had a witness, and the walls around me began to crack. Sarah built on Carlos's testimony by presenting a carefully compiled timeline. The prison laundry logs confirming I was in the facility at the exact time the emails originated, juxtaposed with Carlos's camera images of Michael in his apartment. Each piece fit like a puzzle. Michael's car on the curb, his keystrokes at the laptop, my own account locked away behind the thick prison walls. As the judge reviewed the timeline, I felt the scales of justice begin to tilt ever so slightly in my favor. Even with this avalanche of new evidence, the road to exoneration wasn't guaranteed. The prosecutor fought back, arguing that Michael's memory was unreliable and that server logs could be manipulated. But Sarah anticipated these objections. She called an independent forensic analyst to the stand who explained how server logs are cryptographically secured and any alteration would leave a detectable trace. The analyst confirmed there were no such traces. The logs were authentic. Late that evening, after the deposition concluded, I returned to my cell feeling a blend of exhaustion and exhilaration. As I lay on my bunk, I thought about Michael, how he had twisted brotherly trust into a weapon. But more than anger, I felt an overwhelming gratitude for Carlos's bravery and for Sarah's unwavering belief in my story. In the darkness, I whispered, "I'm one step closer to breathing free air again." As Act 4 closes, I gazed out the small, barred window at a sliver of night sky. Despite the looming prison walls, a sliver of hope glowed in that tiny pane. I vowed, by the time this is over, the world will know the truth. Michael's lies will crumble and I will walk out of here a free man. The morning of the review hearing arrived with an electric mix of dread and anticipation. Dressed in a clean, collared shirt I'd borrowed from Sarah's office, I was escorted from my cell to the courthouse by 2 guards. My parents waited in the gallery, faces pale but resolute. My father's grip on my mother's hand tightened as I passed. I offered a small nod to let them know I was holding on to hope. Inside the courtroom, the judge, a stern woman with silver hair, took her seat atop the bench. The prosecutor was already standing, shuffling papers and preparing to argue Michael's case again. My heart pounded as Sarah approached the podium. I sank into the prisoner's box, my knuckles white as I gripped the wood, recalling every step we'd taken to expose Michael's deception. This was it, the moment where all our hard work might finally pay off. The prosecutor began with a confident tone. "Your Honor, the original conviction was based on reliable financial records and expert testimony confirming the defendant's guilt. We maintain that Michael's statements are credible, and no new evidence sufficiently undermines the forensic analysis." His words dripped with certainty, but Sarah was ready. She rose, cleared her throat, and addressed the judge directly. "Your Honor, we respectfully disagree. Our new evidence demonstrates that the so-called reliable financial records were manipulated by the defendant's brother, Mr. Michael Robinson. We will now present proof." Sarah called first upon Carlos Gutierrez, joining via video link. He took the stand and calmly reiterated that on the night of the key electronic transfers, he and Michael had been together in Michael's apartment, complete, with date-stamped camera stills showing Michael entering and exiting, matching server log timestamps. I watched his face on the screen, marveling at his composure. His testimony shattered the foundation of the prosecution's timeline. Next, Sarah presented the independent forensic analyst, Dr. Angela Price, who detailed how the server logs were cryptographically secured and immune to tampering. She explained that any attempt to alter the IP address data would have triggered a mismatch in the hash values. The analyst displayed a side-by-side comparison of the original State Lab's flawed report versus the corrected timeline. Each slide drove home the lab's failure to detect discrepancies between Michael's IP and the prison's laundry facility IP, where I was locked down at the time. The courtroom hushed as Sarah then introduced the laundry attendant via a written affidavit, confirming I was locked inside the prison laundry room at 11:03 p.m., the exact moment the forged emails were dispatched. The affidavit described the guard's watch in detail, verifying I was physically incapable of accessing the bank server. I felt tears welling as the judge carefully examined each document. The prosecutor attempted to object, but Sarah's prepared rebuttal, citing case law on evidence admissibility, left him stifled. Finally, Sarah called me to the stand. My legs trembled as I rose and took the oath. I looked directly at the prosecutor, then at the judge and my family, and recounted the emotional turmoil of being betrayed by my own brother. I described how Michael had chosen to destroy my life for his own gain, and how I spent years in prayer and study, determined to prove the truth. Though my voice wavered, every word rang with conviction. As the judge reviewed my testimony alongside the digital logs, Carlos's affidavit, and Dr. Price's analysis, her expression shifted from guarded neutrality to contemplative gravity. After a tense pause, she banged her gavel gently and declared, "Given the overwhelming new evidence indicating that the original conviction is predicated on manipulated data and false testimony, this court hereby vacates the conviction of Jason Robinson and orders his immediate release." A surge of relief crashed over me as the bailiff unlocked my handcuffs. Sarah rushed forward, eyes shining with tears. My parents leapt from their seats, embracing me with sobs of joy. As I stepped out from the prisoner's box, free. For the first time in nearly 8 years, I felt the weight of injustice lift from my chest. I inhaled deeply, savoring each breath of courtroom air as though it were a long-lost treasure. Walking through the courthouse doors into the bright sunlight, I paused to blink against the glare. My father wrapped his arms around both of us, and my mother's tears soaked my shoulder. I realized that life would never return to what it was before Michael's betrayal. But in that moment, with the sky above and my family beside me, I knew I was no longer defined by his lies. I was a free man, and my fight for the truth had finally set me free. As I stepped out of the courthouse and felt the sun on my face for the first time in years, a wave of emotion washed over me: relief, gratitude, and a profound sense of rebirth. I looked around at the bustling streets beyond the courthouse steps and realized how small everyday life had once felt behind those prison walls. Now, every breath of fresh air seemed like a victory. My family greeted me with tearful embraces. My father's normally stoic face quivered as he said, "Welcome home, son." And my mother's arms felt like a sanctuary I'd longed for. My little sister, now in college herself, threw her arms around me and whispered, "I knew you'd make it." In that moment, I recognized the depth of their sacrifice. Countless late-night phone calls, mounting legal bills, and an unwavering faith in my innocence. Over the next days, I re-entered a world that felt both familiar and strange. I visited our family home, walking through rooms I hadn't seen since my arrest. My old bedroom was still intact, posters of college basketball players on the walls, my childhood trophies on the shelf, but it felt like someone else's room. I sat on my old desk, touched the worn surface, and realized how much I'd changed. I was no longer just the finance grad, or the accused. I was someone defined by resilience. I reconnected with my fiancée, Emily, at our favorite coffee shop, where we'd spent so many afternoons dreaming about our life together. When I walked in, she stood at our usual table, eyes red but shining. She rose, and we embraced so tightly that it felt like we were both afraid to let go. Over coffee, we held hands and spoke of divorce initially, not because she didn't believe in me, but because the emotional toll on her had been immense. Yet, as we talked, we realized our love had only deepened through this trial. We vowed this second chance would be our new beginning. With time to spare now, I visited my old university campus. As I strolled past the finance building, halls where I once dreamed of whiteboard equations and career seminars, I felt a pang of nostalgia. Then I entered the lab where I'd interned, greeted by the dean, who apologized profusely for how the state lab's errors forced my life off course. He offered me a full scholarship to finish my degree and to mentor current forensic science students on ethical practices. I accepted, determined to use my story to teach future professionals the critical importance of accuracy. Driven by both personal experience and passion for reform, I joined Brothers in Justice, an advocacy group dedicated to preventing wrongful convictions. I began speaking at legal conferences, sharing my tale of betrayal and perseverance, emphasizing how a courageous witness like Carlos and diligent forensic analysis turned the tide. Each time I spoke, I saw eyes widen as people grasped how fragile digital evidence could be. I realized that my fight had become a mission, ensuring no one else suffered the same fate. I also created a small nonprofit called Truth Tracks, partnering with cybersecurity students and legal clinics to develop a secure electronic ledger for financial transactions and forensic logs. Our goal was to help institutions lock down critical data with tamper-evident technology. In our first pilot program, we worked with a county clerk's office to enhance their document verification system. Watching the first batch of test cases pass without error filled me with pride. My ordeal had sparked concrete change. On my wedding day, nearly a year after my exoneration, I stood at the altar in a sunlit courtyard, Emily glancing at me with tears and laughter in her eyes. As I watched her walk toward me in a simple white dress, I felt every emotion I'd bottled up over the years swell into one powerful tide: joy. When I recited my vows, I paused to honor the unexpected path that led me there. I promised to cherish every second of our life together, for I have learned just how fragile time can be. In the months that followed, I balanced finishing my engineering courses, expanding truth tracks, and speaking at events. Each morning, I wrote in my journal gratitude for freedom, determination to keep fighting for those still behind bars, and a commitment to nurture the trust and love in my own family. I reconnected with my brother Michael through a letter. I forgave him in hopes of healing, though we both knew our relationship would never be the same. Now, as I sit at my desk in a modest home office, I often glance at a small framed photo of Carlos, his bravery lighting the path that led me here. I think of every moment of fear, betrayal, and doubt that brought me to this second chance. If there's one truth I want viewers to carry with them, it's this: no lie is so deep that a single courageous voice cannot break through. Even when betrayal comes from family, hope endures, and justice can still prevail.